The underground market reeked of desperation and unwashed bodies. Marcus adjusted his worn leather coat as he navigated through the maze of stalls, selling everything from stolen tech to exotic spices. He wasn't here for any of that. His supplies were running low at the homestead. And this grimy trading post was the only place within 3 days. A ride where a man could buy what he needed without too many questions asked. The torch flames cast dancing shadows on the stone walls as merchants hawked their wares in a dozen different languages. Most were human, but scattered among them were the blue-skinned Cathara traders from the northern territories and even a few of the insectoid. Scrim, who rarely ventured this far from their hive cities, Marcus paused at a weapons stall, examining a plasma rifle that had seen better days. The price was reasonable, but he'd learned to be cautious about buying military hardware from questionable sources. Too often it was stolen from government armories, and possession could mean a death sentence if the wrong patrol found it. "Looking for something special, friend?" the stallkeeper asked, his accent marking him as one of the Outer Rim colonists. "Just browsing," Marcus replied, setting the rifle back down. He was about to move on when he heard a voice that made him freeze. "Please," someone whispered in the alley behind the weapons stall. "I can work. I can cook and clean. I won't cause trouble." The desperation in that voice cut through Marcus like a blade. He'd heard that tone before in the refugee camps. After the war, it was the sound of someone who had lost everything except the will to survive. Curiosity overrode his better judgment, and he slipped into the narrow alley. What he saw there made his blood run cold. A Cathara trader, distinguishable by his blue-tinged skin and elaborate facial tattoos, stood over a young woman who knelt in the dirt. She was clearly not fully human. Her skin had a subtle lavender hue, and her eyes held depths that spoke of alien heritage. A metal collar encircled her neck, attached to a chain that the trader held loosely in his grip. 50 silver pieces. The trader was saying to another man, "And she's yours. Good worker, this one. Won't give you any trouble." The potential buyer, a scarred human in mining gear, circled around her like she was livestock. "She looks half-starved." "What good is a slave that can't do heavy work?" "She's tougher than she looks," the trader insisted. "Smart. Can read and write in 5 languages. It's useful for a man with business interests." Marcus felt his jaw clench. Slavery had been illegal in the human territories for decades, but out here in the borderlands, the law was whatever the strongest person said it was. He'd known it went on, but seeing it up close brought back memories he'd tried hard to forget. The woman Zara, he heard the trader call her, raised her eyes and met his gaze for just a moment. In that brief contact, he saw intelligence, strength, and a crushing weight of resignation that no person should have to carry. "I'll take her," Marcus heard himself say, stepping out of the shadows. Both men turned to look at him with surprise. The miner scowled. "We were here first, friend. Find your own property." 75 silver, Marcus said calmly, reaching for the coin pouch at his belt. It represented most of his savings, money he'd planned to use for winter supplies and equipment repairs. But something about the way Zara looked at him, hopeful and terrified at the same time, made the decision easy. The trader's eyes lit up with greed. "Now that's more like it. 75 it is," the miner started to protest. But Marcus fixed him with a stare that had once made enemy soldiers think twice about their life choices. The man muttered a curse and stalked away. Money changed hands. With practiced efficiency, the trader pressed the chain into Marcus's grip and melted back into the crowd, eager to spend his unexpected windfall. Marcus found himself alone with Zara, who knelt in the dirt, looking up at him with a mixture of confusion and fear. "What's your name?" he asked gently, crouching down to her level. "Zara," she whispered, flinching slightly as if expecting punishment for speaking without permission. "I'm Marcus." He pulled out a small multi-tool and began working on the lock of her collar. "I didn't buy you to own you, Zara. I bought you to free you." Her eyes widened in disbelief. "Why?" The lock clicked open, and Marcus carefully removed the metal collar, tossing it aside with obvious disgust. "Because nobody should be owned by another person, and because... Why?" He paused, studying her face. Because something tells me you've got more to offer the world than just cooking and cleaning. Zara rubbed her neck where the collar had chafed the skin raw. For the first time since he'd seen her, she straightened her shoulders and looked him directly in the eye. What happens now? Now we get out of this place, Marcus said, offering her his hand. My homestead is 3 days from here. It's not much, but it's safe and it's free. You're welcome to stay as long as you like, or until you decide what you want to do next. She stared at his outstretched hand for a long moment before taking it. Her grip was stronger than he'd expected, calloused from hard work but steady. Why should I trust you? Because you don't have much choice, Marcus replied honestly. But also because I give you my word. Where I come from, that still means something. They left the trading post as the first moon rose, Marcus leading his sturdy horse while Zara walked beside him. He'd offered to let her ride, but she'd declined, saying she'd preferred to keep her feet on the ground until she better understood her situation. Marcus respected that. Trust he knew had to be earned. The path through the wilderness was treacherous even in daylight. Marcus had made this journey dozens of times, but never with a companion who might not be able to keep up if they encountered trouble. Tell me about yourself, he said as they walked, partly to break the uncomfortable silence, and partly to gauge what kind of person he'd committed to helping. Where are you from originally? Zara was quiet for so long that he began to think she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of old pain. I was born on Kepler 7 in the mixed colonies. My father was human. My mother was Kethra. When the separatist uprising started, people like me became problematic. Marcus nodded grimly. The colonial government had declared martial law and rounded up anyone with mixed heritage, claiming they were potential spies or saboteurs. Thousands had been sold into indentured servitude to pay for the cost of the military occupation. How long were you enslaved? He asked. 3 years, Zara replied. Bought and sold 4 times. Oh, the trader you met was the worst of them, but none of them were what you'd call kind. They crested a hill, and Marcus paused to scan the horizon. The grasslands stretched endlessly ahead of them. Somewhere in that vast expanse were the people who called this world home, and not all of them were friendly to travelers. You said you could fight, Marcus said, resuming their walk. What kind of training do you have? For the first time since he'd met her, Zara almost smiled. She taught me blade work and hand-to-hand. Combat from the time I could walk, said that, in an uncertain universe, the ability to defend yourself was the most valuable skill anyone could possess. She sounds like a wise woman. She was died in the first wave of the purges, along with my father. They tried to protect other families who were being targeted. Zara's voice remained steady, but Marcus could hear the grief underneath. I got away because I was small and fast, but I was also alone. Easy prey for slavers. They made camp in a sheltered grove beside a stream that ran clear and cold from the mountains. Marcus built a small fire and prepared a simple meal from his travel supplies, while Zara tended to his horse with practiced efficiency. She clearly knew her way around. Animals. You're very quiet, she observed as they ate. Most men who ... acquire women like me have expectations. Marcus looked up from his food, meeting her wary gaze. I told you, I didn't acquire you. I freed you. There's a difference, there. Zara challenged. You paid money for me, in most places. That makes me your property, whether you call it slavery or not. Not where I come from, Marcus said firmly. Not where we're going. My homestead is in free territory. Out. There you're exactly as free as you choose to be. Zara studied his face in the firelight, searching for deception. And if I choose to leave tomorrow, then I'd wish you well, and hope you find whatever you're looking for. It was quiet for a long time after. That, staring into the flames? When she finally spoke, her voice was softer. I don't remember what it feels like to make choices for myself. It's been so long since anyone asked what I wanted instead of just telling me what to do. What do you want? Marcus asked. The question seemed to catch her off guard. She opened her mouth to answer, then closed it again, frowning. I don't know. Safety, I suppose. A place to belong, but beyond that, ... Whoa, she shrugged helplessly. I'll have to think about it. That night, they took turns on watch. Marcus had expected to lie awake worrying about whether he could trust his new companion. But something about Zara's presence was oddly comforting. Alertness was reassuring rather than threatening. When trouble came, it arrived without warning. Marcus was dozing lightly during Zara's watch when she hissed his name. He was instantly awake, hand moving to his weapon as he followed her gaze toward the edge of their camp, glowing eyes reflected their firelight from multiple positions in the darkness. Shadow wolves, the apex predators of this region. Pack hunters, with intelligence that bordered on the supernatural. How many? Marcus whispered, counting the pairs of eyes he could see. Maybe more circling behind us. The lead wolf stepped into the light, revealing a creature the size of a large dog, but with proportions that were somehow wrong. Its fur was midnight black with blue highlights, and its teeth gleamed like polished bone. Behind it, the rest of the pack emerged from the shadows with predatory grace. Marcus drew his sword while Zara moved to cover his back. They stood pressed together in the circle of firelight, surrounded by hungry eyes and the sound of growling that seemed to come from all directions at once. "They're testing us," Zara murmured, deciding if we're worth the risk. The first attack came without warning. Marcus's blade caught the first attacker across the chest, dropping it with a yelp of pain. But the second wolf slipped past his guard and would have taken him down if Zara hadn't intercepted it with a precise thrust to the throat. They fought back to back, their movements surprisingly coordinated for two people who had just met. Marcus's military training showed in his efficient swordwork, while Zara displayed the fluid grace of someone who had learned combat as a matter of survival rather than sport. When the last wolf retreated into the darkness, 4 of the pack lay dead around their campfire. Marcus and Zara stood panting in the sudden silence, both bleeding from minor wounds but very much alive. "Well," Marcus said, cleaning his blade, "I'd say we make a good team." Zara looked at him with something that might have been the beginning of trust. "Yes," she agreed. "We do." The homestead appeared before them like something out of a dream after 3 days of hard travel through increasingly wild terrain. Built into the side of a natural hill, it consisted of several stone buildings connected by covered walkways, with terrace gardens cascading down the slope below and pastures spreading across the valley floor. "It's beautiful," Zara breathed, stopping to take in the view. She'd expected a crude shack, not this carefully planned settlement that seemed to grow organically from the landscape itself. "It's home," Marcus replied, but she could hear the pride in his voice. "Took me 2 years to build it all. Still expanding when I can find the time and materials." As they approached the main house, animals emerged from the corrals to investigate the newcomers. Zara stared in fascination at creatures she'd never seen before: horses with 6 legs and blue-tinted manes, cattle with crystalline horns that caught and refracted the sunlight, and smaller animals that might have been sheep except for their metallic fleece. "Where did you find these?" she asked, watching a young foal approach with curious intelligence shining in its large eyes. "Trade mostly," Marcus explained, leading his travel horse toward the stables. "Some are native to this region, others are hybrids created by my neighbors. Everything here has been bred to thrive in this environment and eat the local plants." Inside of the main house was as impressive as the exterior. Clean, well-organized rooms, furnished with handmade furniture, and lit by oil lamps that burned with steady, smoke-free flames. Books filled shelves along every wall, and the kitchen was equipped with tools and utensils that spoke of someone who took cooking seriously. "Your room is upstairs," Marcus said, showing her to a chamber with a real bed, a writing desk, and a window that looked out over the valley. "Take whatever time you need to settle in. You can talk about what comes next when you're ready." Alone. For the first time in years, Zara sat on the edge of the bed and tried to process what had happened to her. 3 days ago, she'd been property, owned and controlled by men who saw her as nothing more than a useful tool. Now she had her own room, her own space, and the freedom to come and go as she pleased. It was terrifying. That evening she found Marcus in the kitchen preparing dinner. He'd changed from his travel clothes into clean work pants and a simple shirt that showed the lean strength of someone who worked with his hands. Without the dust and grime of the road, She could see that he was younger than she'd first thought, probably in his early 30s, with brown hair and green eyes that seemed to miss nothing. "Can I help?" she asked, hovering uncertainly in the doorway. "Can you cook?" Marcus replied with a slight smile, "Because I have to admit, my skills in that area are pretty limited." Zara moved to examine the ingredients he'd assembled on the counter. Fresh vegetables from his gardens, meat from his livestock, and spices she didn't recognize but which smelled intriguing. "I can manage something edible with this." As she worked, Marcus cleaned up around her and told her about life on the homestead. The work was hard, but satisfying. The nearest neighbors were 20 miles away, but they looked out for each other when needed. There were dangers, predators, raiders, and the occasional territorial dispute, but also a freedom that couldn't be found in the settled territories. "Why did you come out here?" Zara asked, stirring a pot that was beginning to smell heavenly. "You said you were a soldier before. Why leave that life behind?" Marcus was quiet for a moment, his hands still as he considered how to answer. "I got tired of fighting other people's wars for other people's causes. Tired of being told that killing strangers was justified because they believed different things or came from different places." He resumed his cleaning with perhaps more force than necessary. "Out here, the only person I have to answer to is myself." They ate by lamplight, the simple meal somehow made special by the fact that it was the first she'd cooked as a free woman. Marcus complimented her cooking with obvious sincerity, and Zara found herself relaxing in ways she hadn't in years. "What were you like before?" Marcus asked, as they lingered over cups of tea made from local herbs. "Before the war? Before everything changed?" Zara smiled, a real smile that transformed her face completely. "I was studying to be a teacher. Loved books, loved learning new things. My mother said I asked too many questions, but my father encouraged my curiosity." The smile faded slightly. "I was going to help build schools in the frontier colonies, bring education to places that had never had it." "Still could," Marcus pointed out. "There are settlements out here that would welcome a teacher," maybe Zara said, but her tone suggested she wasn't ready to think about the future yet. Over the following days, they settled into a routine that felt surprisingly natural. Zara proved to be everything she'd claimed, and more, an excellent cook, who could turn Marcus's basic ingredients into meals that were both nutritious and flavorful. A skilled organizer who brought order to spaces that had been managed by a bachelor for too long, and a hard worker who could handle any task from tending animals to repairing equipment. But more than that, she became a partner. When decisions needed to be made about crops or livestock or trade agreements with neighbors, Marcus found himself asking for her opinion. When evening brought leisure time, they shared stories and knowledge, learning about each other's backgrounds and dreams. The attraction between them grew slowly, like a fire built carefully with dry kindling and tended with patience. It showed in small things, the way Marcus's eyes followed her as she moved through the house, the way Zara found excuses to brush against him as they worked together. The conversations that lasted long into the night because neither wanted to be the first to say goodnight. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the alien sunset paint the sky in shades of purple and gold, Zara finally voiced what they were both feeling. "I never expected this," she said quietly. "What didn't you expect?" Marcus asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. "To be happy, to feel like I belong somewhere." She turned to look at him, her expression serious. "When you bought me in that market, I thought I was just changing from one form of slavery to another. But this, ... this is what freedom actually feels like, isn't it? It's not just the absence of chains, but the presence of choice." Marcus reached over and took her hand, intertwining their fingers. "You've always had choices, Zara, even when it didn't feel like it. You chose to survive. You chose to keep your dignity when others tried to take it away. You chose to trust me when every instinct probably told you not to." She squeezed his hand, marveling at how right it felt. "And what about you? What did you choose?" "I chose to see you as a person instead of property. Chose to believe that freedom is something worth fighting for, and I chose..." He paused, meeting her eyes. "I chose to fall in love with a woman who's stronger and braver than she knows." The kiss that followed was gentle at first, tentative, as if both were afraid of breaking the spell that had brought them together. But then Zara melted against him, her hands fisting in his shirt as she kissed him back with years of loneliness and need behind it. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Marcus, Zara whispered, "I choose you too." The victory celebration that night was muted by the knowledge that the threat hadn't truly ended. The Prophet and many of his followers had escaped, and wounded fanatics were often more dangerous than healthy ones. But for the moment, the homestead was safe, and that was enough. Zara found herself accepted by the neighbors in a way she'd never experienced before. These people judged her by her actions in battle, not by the color of her skin or the mixed nature of her heritage. When old Henrik, a grizzled human veteran, raised a toast to the best damn shot in the valley, felt tears of gratitude sting her eyes. But the real moment of truth came later, when she and Marcus were alone on the porch of their rebuilt home. The raiders had done significant damage before being driven off, and it would take weeks to repair everything. Yet somehow, the destruction felt like a beginning rather than an ending. "I've been thinking," Marcus said, his arm around her shoulders as they watched the stars appear in the darkening sky. "Dangerous habit," Zara teased, then grew serious as she saw his expression. "What about?" "About what Cora said after the battle. About how we work together, how we complement each other." He turned to face her fully. "Zara, I love you. Not just because you're beautiful or skilled or brave, though you're all of those things. I love you because you make me want to be a better man. You make me believe in things I thought I'd lost faith in. You showed me that freedom isn't just about broken chains. It's about choosing who you want to be and who you want to be with." "Then marry me," Marcus said simply. "Not because I bought you or because you owe me anything, but because we choose each other. Because together, we're stronger than we are apart." "Yes," Zara whispered, then louder. "Yes, of course yes." They kissed under the alien stars, and in that moment both felt the future spreading out before them like an uncharted territory full of possibility. There would be challenges ahead. The Prophet was still out there, and the galaxy was full of people who would see Zara's mixed heritage as something to be feared or eliminated. But they would face those challenges together, as partners and equals. The wedding took place 3 months later, officiated by Cora under the ancient traditions that recognized love as the only authority that mattered. Neighbors came from hundreds of miles away to witness the union of the human who had chosen freedom over profit and the woman who had chosen love over safety. As they exchanged vows they had written themselves, Marcus promised to honor Zara's strength and independence, while she promised to share her fears and hopes with him as they built a life together. There were no mentions of obedience or submission, no archaic language about property or ownership. But instead, they spoke of partnership, of dreams shared and burdens divided. The celebration lasted 3 days. With music and dancing and enough food to feed a small army. But the moment Zara treasured most came on their wedding night, when she and Marcus were finally alone in the home they had defended and would continue to build together. "No regrets?" Marcus asked, as they lay in their marriage bed. Moonlight streaming through the window, they'd rebuilt with their own hands. "Only one," Zara replied, tracing patterns on his chest with her fingertip. Marcus tensed slightly. "What?" "I regret that it took so long to find you," she said with a smile, "and that we had to go through so much pain to get here." "But we did get here," Marcus pointed out, pulling her closer. "And now we have the rest of our lives to make up for lost time." They made love with the passion of newlyweds and the deep connection of partners who had been tested by fire and emerged stronger. In Zara's cries of pleasure and Marcus's whispered endearments, there was no echo of the marketplace where they had met, no shadow of chains or collars or the concept of one person owning another. There was only love, freely given and joyfully received. Years later, when travelers came to their valley and marveled at the thriving community they had helped to build, Zara would sometimes think back to that night in the underground market when she had been at her lowest point. She would remember the desperation that had driven her to her knees, the certainty that her life was over before it had truly begun. And then she would look at Marcus, perhaps teaching their children how to tend the alien livestock or showing a neighbor how to improve their crop yields, and she would smile. because she had learned that sometimes the darkest moments were just the prelude to the greatest joys. Sometimes the end of one story was really the beginning of a much better one. The homestead grew over the years, becoming a symbol of what was possible when people chose cooperation over conflict, love over fear. Zara established the school she had always dreamed of, teaching children of every species and heritage that their differences were strengths rather than weaknesses. Marcus became something of a legend among the frontier settlers, the man who had proven that doing the right thing was sometimes the most profitable choice of all. But perhaps most importantly, they became proof that love could triumph over the worst that the galaxy had to offer. That two people who chose each other, who respected each other's strength and supported each other's dreams, could build something beautiful in even the harshest environment. And in the end, that was the greatest victory of all.